The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. Inside Analysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com. InsideAnalysis.com. And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Oh, yes, folks. Welcome to the future indeed. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh. I'm the only coast-to-coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. And today, folks, we're going to talk about the human touch. Yes, indeed. AI for HR, human resources. So artificial intelligence for human resources. All the folks in HR who hire, fire, try to help us through the whole journey of working for a company. We're going to learn from a couple of experts here. We've got Geoff Webb, Head of Solution Strategy at HR tech company iSolved, and Jaylene Owen, Head of HR at Hames Corporation, calling in all the way from Alaska. And Geoff is over in Houston, and yours truly is in Texas as well. So we've got two Texans and an Alaskan on the show to talk about AI and HR. And, HR is changing a lot these days, largely due to AI and also analytics and being able to track and understand. And of course, it's used in the hiring process where they have algorithms now that are just reading these resumes coming across the transom. It's changing how we work day to day. All kind of stuff is happening. So let's dive right in and talk to the experts first. Jaylene Owen of Hames Corporation. Tell us about yourself and how you are thinking about AI for HR.
Well, I am an HR professional. My background is in industrial organizational psychology.
Ooh.
I have just completed my 7 years here being in Alaska. I'm not originally from Alaska. However, though, I came to join the company in 2016 for the family Hames. They're a fourth generation family owned and operated organization here based in Sitka, Alaska. We have a multitude of diverse operations, including retail stores, a grocery store, liquor stores. We have gas stations, residential, commercial properties, you name it. We've got a lot of diversity. So I joined the team here in 2016 to help kind of bring them out of the dark ages. Being on an island, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of resource limitations. And so having my professionalism to be able to kind of address some of their concerns was why I was brought on.
Very cool. We've also got Geoff Webb out there. Geoff, tell us about what you do in the HR space for iSolved.
Yeah, thanks. So I lead the solution strategy team with iSolved. So my job is to make sure that we're constantly looking ahead, evaluating the needs of our customers and partners, and making sure that we're building that into the roadmap for the technology and the services that we deliver to companies here in the US. So I get to talk to a lot of HR professionals, which is how I got to know Jaylene. And I also get to spend a lot of time looking at how the technology and the sort of human experience in the workplace intersect, which has just been fascinating and evolving so very, very quickly at the moment.
Yeah, and maybe so Jaylene, I'll start with you. The human touch. People want to be treated fairly, they want to be treated honestly, and they don't. I mean, personally, one of my pet peeves, I can't stand talking to computer voices. Like when you call these days, it's like, I'm a computer and I can speak in complete sentences. I usually throw some abstract philosophy at it and like, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. It goes back to me. People want to deal with people. We understand that there are technologies behind conversations and behind businesses. That's very well understood. But how are you navigating this change of infusion of AI and analytics in what is a very personal job of HR?
Very carefully. I believe that there are a lot of pros, but there are also a lot of cons. And when it comes to implementing any kind of artificial intelligence, whether it be in human resources or you're going to actively take a role, I think, in your business, you need to take a look at what both positive and negative challenges may have as implications to your business. For us here, we've been looking at things like, could it automate some repetitive tasks? Being on an island, we have a limitation of bodies. There's literally about 8,000 residents that live here year round. We are driven by kind of a tourist industry, but because our industry isn't, it's a year round industry, there is a lot of concerns related to whether or not that is going to be an efficient decision for us. Is it going to be cost effective? Is there going to be the appropriate support? Even when we went through the process of implementing iSolved, iSolved is so on the top of the cutting edge of technology that many of my employees here were not too sure if they were going to like that development. And so it's been a challenge. We don't really have a lot of remote work here on the island, but the idea of being able to support some of our employees, I do have one employee that is in Idaho, and so being able to utilize AI, the advancements to connect us so that we don't have that distance between us any longer has been what I've been focusing on.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And how about you, Jeff? I mean, you're obviously in the thick of these things at
Yeah.
iSolved, trying to help organizations leverage all this new technology.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've sat around and thought about the ethics of all this, but it's like the train has left the station, right? I mean, I joked earlier today, the chat is out of the bag, if you will, of Chat GPT. AI is everywhere, and we're going to have to learn to deal with it. How are you navigating this interesting change in how we do business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, for us, we focus very much on small to medium business in the US. So, there's about 170,000 companies we touch every day, and really our focus has got to be to make it consumable and easy and non-threatening for them. So, the trick here is to stay focused on the outcomes. Like I think it becomes very easy with AI to become very wrapped up in the art of the possible and in the technology. And the reality is, you're running a small business. You've got a lot of things to deal with. I'm looking to retain good people. I want to recruit new people. I want to develop them. That you must stay focused on what's the outcomes we're trying to drive here, and how do the technologies like AI, how do they help us get there easier and quicker and with less work and just less friction in the whole process. And so for us, it's a case of thinking about where does AI get deployed appropriately? What are the right tools that you can infuse AI with? In other words, to make smarter and more independent. And then how do we communicate that in a way that is honestly not threatening to the folks that we're talking to, who already have too much to deal with, and technology coming at them in every direction, and compliance changes, and expectation changes from changing workforce. So I think half of it's a technology question and connecting the technology to outcomes, and the other half is just communicating that in a way that's understandable.
Yeah, that's a great line. And Jaylene, I'll throw it back over to you because you mentioned, I think, the key facet of this whole equation here, which is automation and automating tedious tasks. That's something that HR technology has a fair amount of. And automation is not new. If you think about it, just to be blunt, every piece of software ever written automates something. That's what you're doing, whether it's a word processing application or a photo editing application, whatever it is, you're automating something. So automation isn't new, but this machine learning and AI is relatively new, at least in terms of practice, right? We've had AI for probably 45, 50 years, but it just wasn't it wasn't readily available because it was very expensive. We didn't have the compute power. Now we have all that compute power. And so we can automate things and we can see things in a different way. And that's what kind of gets me excited about this stuff, is that machine learning algorithms can crawl around in the background and just look for patterns of things. And what I've noticed anytime I've used a tool that has that kind of functionality is they will almost always come up with something you did not expect. And I think that's one of the most positive aspects, is that you're going to learn things about yourself and your team and your organization that you didn't know before, because this all-seeing eye is just kind of watching and never blinking and serving up little observations. But what do you think?
Oh, I definitely think you're right. When it comes to the idea of how we could utilize the AI, I think you're absolutely right. We're kind of behind the ball at this point. The cat's already out of the bag. And in the case of where the cost effectiveness can meet the actual resource requirements, it's going to be the most vital piece I think any business can focus on. You also are going to have the issues of that privacy. If the information's collecting and analyzing your data, not only are you concerned about what data does it have access to, but the privacy of that, especially from like a perspective of a small business. When it comes to proprietary stuff, our competition here isn't another grocery store. It's a hospital. It's a bank. When it comes to establishing the clear policy policies on how that data is collected, how it's stored, how it's used, ensuring that our employees aren't going to be worried about their privacy, let alone the company being worried about ours. I also think that it's important to look at the resistance and how that trust can impact things like job displacement. When we start looking at automating repetitive tasks, the smaller tasks, yeah, it's great, especially when we have a labor issue right now and I don't have the skilled individuals to take over some of these jobs. AI can step in, but I definitely do agree that there's a lot of ethical consideration that we also have to take into consideration.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll bring Geoff back in. We talk about things like payroll, for example. That's a wonderful use case for automation. You want to be able to set up a system and then monitor it. And again, getting back to the power of these machines and the power of algorithms, they will catch errors that human beings can make. Humans are error prone. I mean, we just are. It's, we get distracted, we're thinking about something else, so we don't do something correctly. And the nice thing about these machines is that they will catch those mistakes. They'll say, "Bing, something happened here. Take a look at that." So payroll is a great use case for automation, right?
Absolutely. There's a whole bunch of places where you can use that capacity that you referenced of AI to sort of to learn and look for changes to great effect. And payroll obviously is one of them where you can have an AI platform essentially learn what's a normal payroll run for you as a business, but also learn actually at an individual level what's normal for people to be paid. And then if you make a mistake, and it happens even with the best policies and procedures, and even with good automation technology, mistakes can be made. People accidentally get paid twice, for example. I've seen that happen. And having something like AI just go, this is odd, this is unusual. You don't normally do that. Is that a normal payroll run for you? Is there a reason you're suddenly paying a lot more or a lot less? Having that backstop there starts to, again, reduce the workload on the person doing the task, and reduce because they don't have to check as closely, that they know that they've got something running that can do it for them. And also just improve the sort of the general experience. Less, payroll mistakes are a reason that people leave their current company. It's nothing more annoying than not getting paid the right amount of money. So yeah, it's a great place to put it. There are a bunch of other places. We think of those really as being the sort of three areas we think of AI really working in the role of HR, and that would be one of them. It's sort of in the flow of work where you've got AI watching things happen, and helping to sort of improve and smooth out the automation process. There are obviously other areas too, but just at the most basic level, getting stuff done and reducing the workload and reducing errors is a huge win for every overworked, overstressed HR, payroll, and benefits administrator out there.
That's right. Well, the other area that I'm sure is very rich with possibilities here is benefits and just understanding benefits and different packages and different programs. And I don't know about you, but I shudder when I look at some manual that I'm supposed to read, learn about something. I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, I'm supposed to read this whole thing. Well, that's something that these large language models are very good at, and AI is getting very good at, is being able to take large amounts of text, feed them into this machine and say, give me a summary to explain what that means to me. I'm thinking that's a huge area because, many people probably don't want to admit that they don't really understand what these benefits packages do, because that's kind of embarrassing, but it's complicated, right? So Geoff, first to you and then over to Jaylene. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, actually. That would be probably the other area where we see AI, one of the other areas where we see AI starting to become really effective in sort of improving and elevating the experience overall of employees and also as a result the business. And that's personalization. And to your point, exactly, understanding things and helping shape and personalize recommendations. This is a good benefits package for someone like you, or here's how to find out more about this particular set of benefits, is one of the areas that we think it's going to have a lot of value. There are plenty of other areas. You think about adding in the ability of AI to recommend not just a benefits package that you might want, but training you might need in your job. People in your job should take these sets of courses to improve. Improving just any sort of set of things that the company delivers and personalizing them for that set of employees is you can scale that with AI, which is really hard to do when you're doing it manually with people.
That's a good point. And that gets us to really the crux of what we're talking about is we want to use these technologies to tackle the tedium and to tackle the complexity where possible. And we had a show a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about scheduling And if you've got, let's say, a hospital with 200 nurses, for example, and one of them wants to take time off, well, right now it's a very manual job for a lot of places. And some person has to sit there and look at the schedule and say, all right, well, if I put Bob over here and Susie goes there, that's a pain in the rear to do. But some of these technologies can bang that stuff out in their sleep, right? It's just like you just enter the so-and-so wants this off, bing, use, send it to Fred, send it to John, send it to Jim or whatever. The machines can do that stuff extremely well. And then also it's a machine doing it. And it's not Jim, the person who oversees, who's going to get, a bunch of people mad at him because he said, okay, you do this, you do that. I'll throw that over to Jaylene. That's a classic example of how these machines can do a very tricky job with no bias because they're just getting the job done. What do you think?
Oh, that's a loaded question in my opinion, because I think that it's important to also, well, to go back a little bit to what Geoff was saying, especially like when you look at things like benefit management, employee classification, larger companies, you're going to have a lot of different types of plans, how you manage that, ensuring that they are getting the kind of assistance that they need, that an HR professional like myself would sit down and help them through maybe an open enrollment process. You're looking at data validation and the accuracy. And I think AI's algorithms can really help us analyze that payroll data, allowing for those inconsistencies and those errors to be flagged, whether it be tax compliance or just the automation of data in general. When it comes to AI, though, in my opinion, I think it's really, really important that when we look at the type of AI you're using, because as you indicated, the natural language processing and the way that the chatbots are engaging and learning to assist our employees, are HR professionals aware of and still actively engaged in that process to be able to utilize that and not allow for possible issues to become an issue. It could be ambiguity. Maybe the system doesn't provide the information you wanted as an HR professional, or it could just be a bias built into the language model.
That's an interesting point. And, we are in the early phases of this. I know with the large language models, there is this tendency to hallucinate. We got to watch out for that. But AI comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And the key to your point, Jaylene, I see Geoff nodding his head as well, is that when you implement these technologies, you always want to be able to track and trace and understand what they're doing. You have to watch out for black boxes, as they're called, that just make decisions about people's lives. You've got to be very careful about that. So you want the transparency. You want to be able to audit the system and to understand what it's doing and to map out and see. And, there are all sorts of ways that's done these days with log files and things of that nature. But you definitely want to be very careful before you put any kind of automation into an organization, especially for something as serious and significant as human resources, because that's dealing with the people who are your company. And every company is a bunch of processes and assets and people. But folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to a couple experts in HR, human resources, of course. We've got Geoff Webb and Jaylene Owen. And Geoff, I'm going to give you the hard question, and I'll let Jaylene think about it for a second. How do you help people who have great deep skepticism about AI in their organization? How do you help them understand that really there are positive sides of this, that the negative sides can be dealt with? How do you talk to people who are very skeptical about this stuff?
Yeah, that's really the heart of a lot of where we're at, I think, as a lot of organizations. I spent this year traveling around the US. I did 50 odd different cities. I probably met a couple of thousand HR people.
Wow.
And a lot of the conversations we talked about, AI came up a lot. And some of the time there's a lot of interest in, well, what are you doing? What should we do? Sometimes it's simply a case of please don't use AI in, polite conversation. I think we've all reached a point where there's so much AI conversation in the news. It's sometimes difficult to cut through to the realistic actual meat of the topic. So part of the challenge is just being down to earth and realistic about what we're going to achieve now and what we should be achieving in the future, and then put it in context. We look at survey results. We do studies ourselves of organizations across the US and look at their attitudes and employee attitudes. Then we try to be sensible and clear about what AI is going to be good at and what people are going to be good at. And I think we're even in this conversation, we're sort of circling around on the areas of, what are AI really good at, and what do people do so much better than AI can do for the foreseeable future that is reassuring in many ways. But yeah, we've asked. I think we ran a survey earlier on this year, a couple of thousand employees in the US. We asked them what they thought about AI, and actually it was close to 70%. I think were relatively positive that it could improve their work experience. So I think there's optimism. I just think there is skepticism, which is good, and then a little concern about how's this actually going to roll out and what it'll look like when it starts to become much more real in the workplace.
Yeah, right. And what about you, Jaylene? You obviously have to counsel people who come to you and say, I don't like this AI stuff at all. What's going on here? It's going to take my job. How do you deal with that?
Well, for me, especially living on an island, we have a unique social, cultural, and even economic dynamics here. There's a lot of specific factors that come into play when we're looking at how you approach people in a small community like this. The sensitivity of taking what would be a personal possible conversation or interaction and expecting the individual to possibly embrace that the same way that they would if it was a person. That's a big concern of mine. Ensuring that there's community engagement through the AI is going to be important, because those interpersonal relationships matter, and they matter especially to people in this local community. When it comes to decision making and being transparent, the use of AI really does concern a lot of people, especially when it comes to the building of the trust of that information. And when we get into, as I stated before, privacy or even fairness concerns. But to kind of speak to how, we would be able to address that skepticism, in my opinion, I think it's really just going to come down to education and awareness, providing and offering clear, accessible information, and really bridging the gap between things that might be demystifying of that AI. It'll allow those individuals to really see what could be augmented, and allowing maybe some showcases where right now because we have a limitation of bodies, my business, or at least my experience here on an island, is almost like a fishbowl or a case study, because we are limited on the resources here. And so we have to kind of think outside of the box and look at things that would possibly allow us to maybe create a user-friendly process to this new technology.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Geoff, I'll bring you back in.
Yeah.
I'm a big lover of data and being able to track things. And I'm just guessing here that one of the cool things you can do at iSolved is when someone uses your technology to help with their HR, over time, you can see, for example, you can score resumes coming in to help you better understand who to hire. But then over time, you can also see how well that works out. And the real value to AI is when you get enough data into a system to be able to ascertain what works and what doesn't work. And then you can do, what they call regression analysis, for example, and go back and look, okay, well, what did happen there and why did this not work? And you can really learn a lot about the people who have come into your company, who works, who doesn't work, because something like a corporate culture is very difficult to define. But if you have enough parameters and you have enough data over, let's say, a year or 2 years, for example, all of a sudden you should be able to get better and better at who you hire, when you hire, what kind of jobs and roles you actually need in the company. All that stuff theoretically gets better and better over time if you're using the technology to track the data and be able to understand it. What do you think about that, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, one of the things that we talk about really early on as organizations think about adopting technology is a single platform that kind of captures all of the employee interactions becomes essential to ultimately unlocking that power of that data later. If you know everything that's happened to that employee, if you capture every interaction, every performance report, every time they log in, every time they check out, again, to your point, not in some sort of creepy big brotherish kind of way, but simply tracking the flow of work and things that are happening. And who your good employees are, and you can evaluate that. You can very quickly start to identify where are the good employees coming from? Where are we spending the most money? Where could we save money on, not hiring people that quit 3 months later?
Right.
And you can also start to do really interesting analysis. Things like, we had one company we worked with. They wanted to move one of their offices, and what they're able to say was, if we move this office from this location to this location, which employees are likely to be at risk of leaving because their commute has become unpleasant, and we already know that's a factor for those kinds of employees, for example. Or, what kind of money should we be spending on benefits for this group of employees, or what's the salary changes we should make for those? So you get good operational data that you can use to sort of improve performance of the business. You also get bigger sort of macro perspectives on your organization. What does the diversity look like of my organization? Is it changing? Is it different in different departments? Are certain managers more likely to lose employees over a period of time than others? So there's a lot of power that you get looking at your own company from the data, and that, I think, is part of the job. Really, is to unlock that and make it very consumable for HR folks and business leaders. I actually think there's another area too that we forget about. We just talking about our own, iSolved as a company, we touch the lives of about 7 million US employees every day.
Jeez.
And you think about what that means when a company, you're running a bank in Des Moines, for example, and you're not sure why your bank tellers are leaving. Well, you have the ability using these kind of technologies to say, well, are we losing bank tellers faster or slower than other bank tellers in Des Moines or in Iowa or in the US? And are we paying more or less? Are we spending more or less on benefits? So that capacity to not only unlock the sort of insight of what's happening operationally in your own business and therefore impact the experience of your employees, but to then go benchmark yourself against other organizations and say, well, how are we doing? Are we better? Are we worse? What are the areas we could improve in? That becomes incredibly powerful too. So yeah, you're right. That sort of capacity to hold and analyze, to consume data and sort of spit out results and insights really starts to redefine what's possible for HR people, business leaders, payroll folks, and so on, to just drive better business outcomes.
Yeah, that's a great point that you just made, and it kind of gets us back to being data driven and doing these comparisons, because again, you might think, oh, we're doing a terrible job. Are you? If you have the capacity to see what your peers are doing and what those rates are for those other companies, now you understand, oh no, this is actually normal. But and Jaylene, I'll throw this one over to you. The other really interesting space I have to believe is in training and research and learning and being able to, for compliance purposes, but also just for improving the workplace, having people take classes on various aspects of the business, being able to track, okay, we rolled out this program to help people be more sensitive around diversity. For example, did the complaints go down a month later, or did they stay the same? Did they go up? You can kind of better understand what's working and what's not working from an educational perspective, right?
Oh, definitely. As long as the information that you're receiving is accurate. Where I get concerned about is the unintended consequences that the AI system may produce,
Sure.
especially if that information or the data isn't being set up properly, or the interpretation of the data is being determined by maybe another AI, because you get that bias involved. But yeah, definitely. I think that when it comes to the dynamics, especially within a small workforce like myself, education and training are vital. It's what determines our success. And especially me being on an island where I have a devoid of skill level and education or even knowledge, and I'm bringing people in because the labor is short, I need to be able to benefit from whatever technology can give me and speed those processes up to give me a balance between the innovation with the traditional.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of bias, I remember learning about this story back in 2018. Amazon, which of course is a very big company, very analytics and AI friendly, very focused on that stuff. They rolled out this AI recruiting tool that basically said, don't hire women. And so they're like, what? Oh no, hold on, turn that thing off. You do have to watch out. That's the sort of common sense moment. I'll throw it over to Geoff. AI gets stuff wrong. I mean, it is artificial intelligence, and real intelligence can get stuff wrong. People get stuff wrong all the time.
Sure.
So AI doesn't mean it's perfect. It's just making some recommendation based upon a model, based upon data that's fed. And you got to watch for these things and watch out for it. And that was just a classic example that yes, bias does exist, and you have to watch out for it. So you always have to, keep your human hat on as you're using things like AI, right, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jaylene kind of nailed it a couple of times there. Her commentary about transparency earlier on, her commentary about bias right now. I 100% agree, and I think that's the challenge. We know that you can build a model that inherently is fine, but if you train it on bad data, it'll produce bad results.
Mhm.
And so part of the challenge that organizations like ours, every organization that's using AI, but especially when AI is becoming infused in HR processes, the challenge is to make sure that you don't allow that to happen, that you're using it in a way that is ethical and transparent and as unbiased as physically possible. For things like recommending a course that someone should take, or checking your payroll, or simply being a chatbot. We do a lot of work with chatbots to answer basic HR questions like, is next Thursday a company holiday or not? Those kind of things you're relatively unlikely to see a significant bias, but you have to be very careful, even for us, when we start to do things like stack rank resumes to compare them against job openings. You've got to be really careful to not exclude people from that process. You must, provide, to your point, you can provide insight, you can provide recommendations, but ultimately the AI should be working alongside a professional like Jaylene who understands the broader context. And that really starts to define, I think, how we'll see AI becoming realized in HR processes. It's a lot of the time it's going to be working as a counterpart to a professional who can then provide context and the other thing that humans do that AI does not do, which is empathy. Context and empathy is what we are. We're magnificent context and empathy machines. AI is great analytics. You should combine those things when you're thinking about affecting the lives of people in the workplace. You shouldn't have one override the other.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Empathy is so important in business. And I think we're moving through generations, right? We were talking in the break about how we have these multi-generational companies now where you've got baby boomers and Gen Xers and Gen Y and millennials and Gen Z. And like these are very different groups of people in how they react, how they respond, and probably how they respond to data. I mean, kids just grew up with iPhones these days. They know how to use this stuff. Baby boomers did not. And so you always have to keep that in mind. And that's a very personal thing. I'll throw it over to Jaylene real quick, about 90 seconds. It's very important to have that empathy and to always be human to the human people in your organization, right?
Well, yes, definitely. There's one word I would have to say sums this all up. It's the authenticity of it. AI comes from what we tell it and what we program into it. But as Jeff indicated, the empathy doesn't come natural. It's something that I'm concerned as we move forward with this is eventually everything that we can give it as a personality is going to be built in there. But are we going to lose that personal touch, that the authenticity of the matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've joked before. I did a show a few years ago and someone made a joke about something and I was like, they told me to be authentic. I mean, come on. Trying to be myself here. Like, be careful what you wish for out there. But no, these are all excellent points. Well, let's see. We're coming up on a break here. We're talking to Geoff Webb and Jaylene Owen, HR professionals, about the impact of AI. And I think in the next segment we'll dive into the hiring process and what these things look for. You think about Google and search engine optimization and what happened there. Basically, Google has algorithms for how they track and index the web, and then people are always trying to game the system, try to get the Google algorithm to point at them. And so that's got to be happening in the talent acquisition space where they're trying to use algorithms to sort through the data, and someone's trying to trick that algorithm to use the proper words to get them to look at your resume. We'll pick that up after the break, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking all about HR and AI as they come together and what that means for businesses. We've got Geoff Webb of iSolved and Jaylene Owen of Hames. And Geoff, I'll throw it over to you. The talent acquisition side is a very interesting space to tackle because now you can have algorithms that capture the text of the resumes and sort them based upon certain priorities and get some that rise to the top. So you don't have to go through all 100 of them. You can just use the machine to say, all right, look at the top 10. But you do want to understand how it's coming to those conclusions, right? Tell us how you folks are able to use AI for the talent acquisition side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, actually, let me even take a step back from the sort of the premise of your question, because certainly what we've built is, we've built this into technology ourselves, is the ability to sort of start to match the things that the resume is talking about with the things that you're looking for. Just at least start to say, well, this looks like it's a closer match than this set of resumes here, and sort of stack rank and provide some guidance and path through looking at the resumes. But that actually isn't the problem. The problem most organizations face isn't, oh, I've got resumes to deal with. It's finding good people in the first
Mhm.
place. It's attracting them in the first place. And, one of the things that most organizations do a terrible job at is writing job ads. Like most of the time, if you look at job descriptions and job ads, they sound like 100 reasons not to apply for this company. You have to be, you have to have a master's degree in this, and you have to have served overseas, and you have to be able to tap dance and play the banjo, and there's this sort of long list of things that you must be able to do before we want to talk to you. And that's, I think, how a lot of people have been taught how to write job description when they put the ad out there. And actually, what we're seeing is a couple of things going on. One is that, terrifyingly enough, marketing folks are being asked more and more to help market the company through the job ads and descriptions. But AI is also now starting to be used in there to help people that don't professionally write job descriptions and job ads to write things that are actually inviting and interesting and reflect the culture of the company, rather than simply a list of prerequisites like I'm sort of assembling a piece of IKEA furniture. And so it's interesting. What we're seeing is AI being used to start the process earlier. Let's write really good job ads. Let's assist somebody writing a job ad to get people to come in. And then we can start to use also then, a separate set of AI process to start to rank and filter through and analyze the contents of the people that are coming to us. But really, you've got to tackle both ends of that, or else you're just filtering bad sets of resumes coming in without actually getting the good people in the first place. And that's really the challenge most organizations face. So let's get the good people in here. I know this is probably something Jaylene has, could wax lyrical about for quite some time too, given her world.
Yeah, there you go, Jaylene. Over to you.
Well, I definitely can see where utilizing it to do all of the things that I can't do myself when I'm trying to recruit. But I would be concerned about AI putting a priority on specific skills or even on the initial screening process and how people could possibly crack that. And being that there may be this black box, as you had indicated before, with kind of the reasoning behind the decisions. As long as we don't have any type of an over reliance on that automation, that we're actually looking at the results, making sure that we're taking into consideration those unique talents or potential contributions, not just the status of maybe the black and white data. Yeah, they can do the job, but are they going to be a cultural fit to my people? And are they going to be the kind of skill level that I need?
Yeah, that's probably the hard part, right? And I'll throw it over to Geoff to
Yeah.
one for a second, but back to company culture, it's a very difficult thing to define, but it is very palpable. So, are you able now to some extent to be able to sort of absorb that, ascertain that, and then apply that kind of that lens, if you will, to the hiring process?
Yeah, I think this is where the key, and again, that gets to really the heart of this whole conversation, is around there are things that we should expect AI to do for us, and there are things that we should continue to have HR professionals and recruitment professionals bring to the table, that their skills, and again, back to context and empathy. Those are the things that we do better than anybody else. So I think the role here for AI is, let's reduce the workload, let's do initial analysis, let's provide some sort of guided path through the process, and also to your point, to start to look for things like bias creeping into the hiring process. So don't forget, we should also be using AI, and one does, to evaluate the diversity of your organization. Are certain parts of your organization suddenly becoming a whole lot less diverse? Are they starting to recruit just certain types of folks? So there's an opportunity to have some checks and balances with the AI too, to make sure that you're not starting to become some, monolithic organization where everyone looks the same. But yeah, no, you should be recruiting for fit with the organization. I think there's a lot of studies are showing that actually recruiting for the sort of the attitudes and the enthusiasms and the personality are actually far more effective for organizations than just recruiting on skills and experience.
That's
And so you
interesting.
want, again, AI could do some of this, but you got to have it paired with the people whose job it is, the professionals, to actually evaluate more effectively. But that's the whole point, right? That's the point of AI. The point of AI is to free those people up to do those things, to take the workload off their plate. We did a study, and we found about 40% of HR leaders spend most of their day answering the same set of questions, which is a horrific waste of talented people's time, not to mention horribly, probably demotivating. So you want to use tools like AI and automation to take that stuff away so that they then have the time to bring their skills and training and background and empathy and context into the things that those things really make a difference. And sure, absolutely, recruiting should be the first thing that you're looking at there. How do we recruit the right people?
Yeah. I had Steve Lucas, who is now the CEO of Boomi, but before he was the CEO of a company called iCIMS, ICIMS. You may have heard about. It's a recruiting company. And he showed me something that I think they did for Target, which was just brilliant, which is video interviews. So instead of just entering your CV, which is so cold and black and white and hard to describe and hard to even really understand or enrich if you're on the writing side, no, he just had people video in. Hi, my name is Bob. I really like doing X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, that is freaking brilliant, because now you can see the person instead of having to rely on text. I mean, this is an example of how we can leverage all these new technologies to kind of jumpstart the process and get through some of the more painful stuff. Because when you can look and talk to someone, that's a whole lot different than looking at a resume, right, Jaylene?
Oh, definitely. Especially if you can see the person. I've heard about the automation of like interview scheduling and how that's been utilized. My biggest concern, especially being where I'm at on an island, is that the lack of explainability, being able to understand what they're going to be selling me as an applicant. I need to know and be able to see them, and having that opportunity, oh, that would definitely change the game.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And then maybe one last little point on this. The other nice thing, getting back to tracking things, is that, Geoff, I'll throw this to you. If you have your AI suggesting people to hire, well, and you track every time that we went with the recommendation, and how often did that work?
Yep.
Right? Like, you always want to be tracking this stuff to see. It's like, well, for some reason, it keeps recommending people who don't work out. So we got to go back and change the algorithm or do something to sort of rejigger that whole thing. But what do you think, Geoff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's really the definition of AI anyway, is, you sort of, you build a model using machine learning of the model of the world, the model of the process. But really, when it starts, what defines it as really artificial intelligence is the capacity for the system to alter that model as it learns, right? To be able to say, you know what, I keep recommending this and it's not working out. I should start to edge around the parameters, move around, and change the kind of recommendations I'm making. And again, if you have just the plug for the single platform approach here is, because you're able to see everything from sort of pre-hire all the way through, you actually see what happens to people. And so as a result, you can see, when we hired this kind of person, they were wildly successful. This kind of person, not so much. From this place, we hired them, they stayed. From this place, we hired them, they did not. That becomes really valuable.
Yeah, and you can understand the context too. It gets into the concept of a good manager. And I personally, I think that management is one of the most underappreciated jobs in the business world. I'm old enough to remember in the 1980s when we had that big flattening out. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but like, they got rid of all this middle management because it was just an expense. It was like a cost they didn't want to deal with. And that's a problem, because when you have a good manager, first, it took me till I was, I think, 34 or something, and I had a good manager. I moved up to Seattle for him, and I'm in my first meeting with him one-on-one. We get to the last, 5 minutes of the meeting. He goes, "Is there anything I could do for you?" And I remember like looking over my shoulder, like, did some VP walk in? Like, who was I talking to? And that goes to show you what my thought process was around management. I was like, oh my God, I apparently have never had a good manager before, because that is exactly what a good manager should say to you. Good managers don't just tell you what to do. Good managers are there to help you do your job well. It's supposed to be an encouragement role. Yes, there's a disciplinary side to it, but that should be a very rare component to the process, not the norm, basically. So all this technology, what we're saying here, should be used to encourage positive management, to encourage good experiences at companies. We want happy employees. We want the employee experience to be good, because then the customer experience will be good, and it all kind of works out. But you folks are listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis, talking to Geoff Webb of iSolved and Jaylene Owen of Hames, all about AI and HR coming together. And we were just chatting about bias, and what is bias, and how do you detect bias? And then once you've detected bias, what do you do about that detection of bias, right? I mean, these are the hard questions to answer. And I'm not sure if we're in an employee friendly or a hiring friendly, like buyer's market, seller's market. I'm not sure where we are right now. I think it's a very strange world. But in any case, we want to know where there's bias, and help people understand the biases that they have. Because what did Mark Twain said? Bias is the set of experiences you've accumulated by the age of 18 or something like that. I think that's your bias, because that's what you grew up with. But Geoff, I'll throw it over to you first. How do you identify bias, and then what do you do about it when you find it?
Yeah. This is the thing that I think is most critical as we think about AI in HR. I say looking for bias and transparency. Transparency is huge. Like, it's really important to be clear why you're using AI and what you're using it for. And we were talking about, this sort of the model that I think is the way we're evolving anyway, which is that there will be AI systems that are focused on tasks. They're very task centric, and they will go do something. They'll go, look for an error. They'll go look for a change. They'll make recommendations. And ultimately, I think they will feed into other AI systems that can more broadly analyze what's actually happening in your organization. And I think at that layer, as you start to have, you've got task-centric AIs, you've got more general evaluation, you can start to look for biases. You can have AIs that are trained to look for biases, especially if you think about the capacity to compare yourself to other similar organizations across the world, to say, well, wait a minute, are we suddenly skewing in some weird direction that is not normal for our business? And then I think the third thing is the human aspect, right? Again, we come back to this, the vision here should be for AI to be unshackling the HR professional, the people who are trained to deal with people, unshackling their time and energies by dealing with the day-to-day, and helping them have more time, energy, and focus to bring to the table their empathy and their context to their understanding and their training of what's normal and what's appropriate for that organization. So you've got to got to see this as AI working as a part of the team with an HR professional, not replacing the functions of HR professionals, because they're too critical.
That's a really, really, really good point. I'll throw it over to Jaylene to comment on that, but I think it's a great closing argument here, because you're right. Human resources must be run by humans at the end of the day. It's a very human process. Hiring and firing and managing people, it's very human. Empathy is crucial, or no one's going to want to work at your company. I can tell you that for sure. And that reputation will get out. Jaylene, what do you think?
Well, I definitely think it needs to be representative of the population that you're serving. Not all businesses cut the same. We all, as HR professionals, know that we have different demographics. Sometimes bias is built into that demographics. Maybe, as for an example, you're in law enforcement and you don't have the ability to be a little lax on certain types of requirements. But I think it's going to be very important for the human resource professional who implements the AI into their businesses to ensure that they're representing their population, they're focused on reducing any biases, looking at how they can ensure that that data is transparent, and that when you do find those issues and you're reviewing that data, you're cleaning it up. You're looking at what it is and how it is impacting your job, whether it be that you're reevaluating the model. Is this something that we want to continue, that rationale? Or maybe there's some advancements, that algorithmic adjustment has occurred and the technology is now catching up with the needs that as an HR professional, we may not have had in the very beginning.
That's a really, really good point too. And we're on a learning curve. We're all on a learning curve here, and we're going to be on that curve for a while. That's one of the most interesting comments I've heard from someone in this business who said about machine learning, it's about learning, and he meant human learning. So we need to learn how these things work, what they do, what they don't do, and watch out for the holes, the gaps, the biases, and learn about ourselves in the process too. And that's what life's all about, right? Is learning and having fun and working and doing cool things. But folks, look these two up online. Geoff Webb, that's Geoff with a G, Geoff Webb with two B's of iSolved. Jaylene Owen, that's Jaylenelene Owen from Haynes. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for putting the human touch on AI. We'll talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.